Welcome to the July 13th edition of the PFF Forecast. It is Eric and George. We've got a really fun pod for you today because we're going to talk. We got some really good questions from listeners about betting, and it's July 13th, as I mentioned. So it's a great time of the year to talk about betting in general, some questions that we get. I have also some surprise questions for Eric that I think people are really going to enjoy. Some are about betting, some are not. So that's going to be a really good show. It's inspired by the mailbag that we did a few weeks ago. And we are going to open up with a really interesting discussion about a particular left tackle asking for a boatload of money and who's actually winning this negotiation. Let's rock. You are known as many things: mathematical wizard, the big guy, the Sultan, and now the Schefter. Eric Schefter Eager has been doing some due diligence, has been really canvassing the scene, ear to the ground, and it's that time where players who have been traded for draft picks and whose contracts are now up are looking for a lot of money. So this guy near and dear to your heart, who is it that you've been kind of learning more and reading more about?
Yeah, I was on Kansas City radio yesterday with our dear friend and friend of the show, Soren Petro.
Member of the
I've been
syndicate.
on his show probably 4 times since the season mercifully ended in Cincinnati, and every single time he said he's asked me about Orlando Brown. And I finally put my foot in the ground yesterday on his show, and I said, I don't think he's getting signed. And, I've talked to people. I've also talked to, both sides of it, by the way, like, there are aspects of, his side, their side, but that kind of thing. And the interesting thing is like, I just don't, for one, he didn't have an agent until like 6 weeks ago. Right. Mm-hmm. And I know he was like a groomsman in Pat's wedding and like all this stuff. So there are a number of like intangible reasons why they could just quote, get a deal done. But right now reports are, and I think it's accurate. Reports are that he's asking for top of the market deal for a tackle, which would be upwards of like $25 million a season. And, Ronnie Stanley had a $70 million guaranteed. I know, Trent Williams is somewhere around $46 million guaranteed fully. And, our PFF war metric, he was coming out of, Baltimore, which are one of the easier offenses to play in. He was worth 0.33 wins. If you look at 0.33 wins, that's actually worth exactly, funny how good this metric is, $16.5 million, which is exactly what he's playing for on the cap this year, on the tag. Last season for Kansas City, he did miss one game, but he was worth 0.27 wins above replacement, which is right around $13.5 million, right? And you, of course, have to bake in a little bit because there is the asymmetry with, veteran players and players on the rookie deal and all that kind of stuff. You're also paying for past performances to some degree. Him asking for $25 million just puts the Chiefs in a situation where they either have to delete all of the goodwill that they've gotten this offseason from what I would consider sharp perspective, which is, accumulating a ton of draft picks, trading back for the first time in the Brett Veach era, losing on Tyreek Hill because he was too expensive, et cetera, building a secondary, all the great things they've done. Paying Orlando Brown what he wants in this instance gets rid of a lot of that goodwill in my estimation. So reportedly they offered something a lot less than that. And I would be really surprised if they came up on their offer. But, there's still a couple days left, so we'll see. But I'd be surprised if Orlando Brown, if he plays this season, will be playing on anything other than this franchise tag.
So let's go back to April 23rd, 2021, the Kansas City Chiefs, I'm reading, and this is what the NFL wrote on NFL.com. The Kansas City Chiefs made a splash play to protect Patrick Mahomes' blind side, acquiring a Pro Bowl left tackle. So this was, of course, in reaction to the horrific Super Bowl debacle against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where Patrick Mahomes was under siege. So they trade for Orlando Brown, formerly of the Baltimore Ravens, who, by the way, if we rewind even further, was barely more athletic than a traffic cone when he measured at the combine, and was playing right tackle until the aforementioned Ronnie Stanley got injured. And then he moved to left tackle. And upon moving to left tackle, actually graded fairly worse. But over the course of the season, played pretty darn well. And so now as a left tackle, was going to command a little bit more. The Chiefs traded their 2021 first round pick, number 31 overall, a third rounder, number 94, a fourth round pick, number 136, and a 2022 fifth round selection in exchange for Brown, a 2021 second round pick, number 58, and a 2022 sixth round pick. So really, they gave up that first rounder and that third rounder, a fourth and a fifth, but they got back a second, right? So they did recoup a pick in that trade. What I thought was really interesting about this is my initial reaction to hearing you say this was, well, this is exactly how Orlando Brown's agent should negotiate here, because they gave up a boatload and they're pot committed. And like, how stupid will they look if they trade all of this stuff and then don't sign him? But I actually was, I think, mistaking the amount of goods that they gave up for him. You know, this wasn't the Jamal Adams trade. It wasn't the Jalen Ramsey trade. They didn't give up, 2 first round picks. So now I agree with you 100%. Like, there's no way they should pay him $25 million. And by the way, if you look at left tackles on overthecap.com, right? So you mentioned Ronnie Stanley got 70.6 or 70.8, I should say, million guaranteed. Trent Williams is at 23 APY, but he got 45 guaranteed. Laramie Tunsil, 50 guaranteed. That's the second most guaranteed money for any tackle. He's at 22 APY, and Bakhtiari's at 23 APY. So, getting to 25 APY would be a significant jump, right, over the previous number. And if he wants the most in total guarantees, as well, that's what he's trying to set, 71, guaranteed. I mean, that would be ridiculous. And I agree with your point around Tyreek Hill. And I actually think that's why they won't do it. We've already seen, if they're not going to go pay money for Tyreek Hill, then they ain't going to pay money for our guy, Orlando Brown. So I've kind of come around to things. And I guess my take is, Eric, if you're his agent, though, and you look at this and you go, well, if he plays for the Chiefs this year, he's going to have to pass protect against the AFC West edge defenders. Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Chandler Jones, Max Randy Gregory, Bradley Chubb. That's not going to be great. So let's either ask for everything or let's go somewhere else, or it's going to be a little easier.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly it, right? I think that, Orlando Brown has been kind of a clown, right, this whole time. Like, hey, I want to play left tackle, even though, he was mostly a right tackle. He has the worst athleticism score we have in our database for tackles. So it's like, it's honest, but at the same time,
is it really the worst?
Literally the worst, like 3 standard deviations worse than the average tackle. But I get,
is he less athletic than you?
I think so, especially now that I'm, a little leaner.
Yeah.
Trimmed down a little bit. I've been going on jogs. But he's a waist bender.
So 5'8", 540, which I think you might, if you trained, I think you could get him at. This is the one I feel most confident. He bench pressed only 225 only 14 times.
I mean, my brother in Christ, I could probably do that like today.
What would your vertical jump be today?
So people will people don't, and there is a video of me dunking on Twitter. Now that was pre-pandemic, 2019 fall. That's my goal to get back to that. My vertical jump when I was in college was 38.5. Like that's pretty good.
I need some, I mean, you for a big guy got up, you can, and that dunk was, there was no funny business there. I can confirm it was a 10-foot hoop. 19.5. You would have no problem with that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the
38.5 is the real deal. 38.5 is like, they're NBA players that are at
I did like, I think my broad jump was in the 9 feet. Like, I had some pretty, I mean, honest to goodness, the reason I wasn't a good football player is between the ears. I was kind of a huge bitch between the ears. If I knew what I knew now about how to actually succeed in things, I would have been a better player because I was a decent athlete. I was just kind of like, frankly, I didn't have, like, when the ball was in the air, my mind was saying, don't drop it as opposed to catch it, which we all know is a terrible mindset.
That's not great.
But the thing with Brown is I do agree that there's some of this playing into consideration, right? And that's like I don't begrudge the guy. Like, we all in life want to get ours when we have the biggest advantage. Like that's sports betting, right? We're going to talk about sports betting a little bit here. Put a lot down when you have the best of it, right? And pull it back when you don't. And Brown right now probably believes he has the best of it, but good on the Chiefs. Like, and again, I tweet this out today. Some people got frazzled. There's a Chiefs Kingdom subsection of people who say, just pay Orlando Brown, protect Pat. The Chiefs had less information about 2023, understandably, than they had in 2022. In 2022, at the time of the Brown trade, they had the 31st pick in the draft. If you look at the offensive tackles in that draft, the over-under for number of offensive linemen taken in round 1 of 2021 was 6.5. Only 5 went, right? So at 31, were they going to get a starting left tackle? I don't know. None of us knew. They had Joe Thuney, who they paid a significant amount of money to. They had Austin Blythe, who was like a backup center for the Rams. They had Kyle Long coming out of retirement. They had Laurent Duvernay-Tardif coming out of being a doctor during the pandemic. They had Andrew Wiley, who struggled significantly in the Super Bowl at right tackle to go along with Lucas Niang, who sat out because of COVID as a rookie. You had one solid answer out of 5 on your offensive line. So I understand being like, we're going to pay a little extra for the chance to have another answer on our offensive line that's more definitive, right? Fast forward a year, Creed Humphrey's a Pro Bowl caliber center. Trey Smith is a pretty damn good right guard. Joe Thuney is as advertised and played 55 snaps or so at left tackle against a really good Bengals team and gave up only 2 pressures. He could theoretically be there in a pinch. And then they have, Devon Kennard at right tackle, a guy from Kentucky who graded really well and by all accounts fell in the draft because he made his political views, all more noticeable than maybe he should have during the draft weekend. So they have a lot more, we're talking about betting, a lot more outs. They have a lot more ways they can win on the offensive line that don't involve Orlando Brown. And so they're just less desperate. Like, this is how the world works. And I think Orlando Brown believes, well, no, you made all this investment back then. Like, that means something. And the Chiefs are like, well, it means less than it did at the time. And good on them for sort of being pragmatic about that. I'm not saying Orlando Brown's not better than all their other options there, but at $25 million, their other options are better than having Orlando Brown there.
I want to get back to the vertical leap conversation, because I want to give people context here. Your 38.5-inch vertical leap would have been, now not every NBA prospect does the combine. A lot of the top picks don't do it. So I don't know where you would have been relative to those guys, but it would have been tied for the 6th best vertical jump in the entire NBA combine this past year. In the NFL combine, it would have been 2.5 inches better than Aiden Hutchinson, number 2 overall pick. It would have been a 1/2 inch better than Kyle Hamilton. It would have been a 1/2 inch better than Chief George Karlaftis. And I think it's also, unless I'm missing him here, it's higher than Trayvon Walker.
People have to remember I was 6'3", 225 when I was in college. Like I was a small tight end.
Okay. So I'm not saying that you would have been an NFL draft pick, but I am impressed. I'm very impressed.
I mean, like my 40 was like 4.65, like, not terrible. I had a short shuttle of like 4.3 or something like that. Like I said, if I was a good football player, I would have been a good football player. Like I just wasn't a good football player. Like that's like the whole aspect of it.
What do you think happens with the Chiefs? So and when I say what happens, like who is playing left tackle for them next year?
Well, I think Orlando sits out training camp. I think he probably doesn't start the first few games because honestly, like he's fat and like not a great athlete. So like he needs train. Like back in the day when training camp was like 6 weeks long and all these guys had like other jobs and they were coming back to get in shape. That's kind of how Orlando Brown is. He's not like an Adonis like Tyron Smith. So I think ultimately he reports for the season, week 1. And I think that he plays on like field goal unit or something. Like they put him in, but like Tooney starts, Allegretti plays left tackle, left guard, and they go the first couple weeks, and they're probably fine. Week 1 they play Marcus Golden of the Cardinals, who is just a whatever player. He's a good player, but not Chandler Jones level. And then week 2 they play Bosa and Max. So like maybe he plays that game. Maybe they're not ready. I think he sits a couple games, but ends up like starting 12 games or so. And I think he's like average to below average. I think the Chiefs end up not regretting this at all. And I think a benefit is that and then they have a year of runway to move on from him, right? Either they go back into the market and get a left tackle. Maybe they trade for Laramie Tunsil of Houston, right? Laramie Tunsil's contract is very good for the trading team, right? I think his cap hit this year, if you trade for him, is like $2 million. And then like 18 next year. Like that's another option. Mm-hmm. I guess they could always rescind the tag in the next couple of days. That'd be kind of interesting because then they could go out and maybe trade for an edge player. They were rumored to want Robert Quinn. Mm-hmm. Josh Allen of the Jags is another option. I think Ryan Burns if the Panthers stink, although they think the Panthers will be fine now. Not great, but not tanking because they have Mayfield. They have a lot of options. And I think that the thing that will happen he'll play on the tag and then he won't be that good and the Chiefs will be happy that they played ball.
I think I would have to agree with you. And normally I would say they're just going to pay him. Like that was my gut thought. But the Tyreek Hill has me thinking they're not going to pay him. And now I wouldn't be surprised if they did rescind the tag, which would be one of, I think, the rare occurrences in the NFL where someone doesn't go out of their way to validate their past decisions. And it's the NFL is not the only place where this happens, right? I mean, everyone's guilty of this to some extent and like happens all the times in business where you make some stupid decision and then you try and prove yourself right forever and ever. And everyone's known that person. But this would be this would be kind of a cool thing for the Chiefs. It would be great for you, honestly, as the Kansas City Chief himself. We're going to get to some betting questions. Before we do, you should, if you're not already, go play best ball fantasy football at Underdog Fantasy Football. They have a $10 million total cash prize, and all you have to do is draft a fantasy team. It's like the easiest thing on planet Earth. And it's not like you don't have to pay $1 billion to get in or anything like that. The entry fees are, at the most like $25-$50. It's nothing. So go to underdogfantasy.com or download the Underdog Fantasy app. The way that best ball works is you draft your team and then you don't have to worry about it in season. You don't have to pick up anybody, none of that baloney. They just play the highest scores on your roster every time. And if you want some best ball strategy, you can head to pff.com, Our guys play it all the time. Go look at what Ian, Dwayne, Nathan, Kevin are doing. They'll hook you up there. So this is good news. You can get a free PFF subscription out of this. You deposit on Underdog, $100. Sign up with promo code PFF. They'll match your first deposit for up to $100. You get $200. Then play 10 of those with the promo code PFF. Get a free subscription. Go read all that information. Get all that good content. Come back. Enter that $10 million Best Ball Mania tournament and win. You're welcome. And then share some of the money with Eric and I. We'll take a little tip. All right. Listener question. You want to read this one?
Yes, for sure. Let's, this is great. Every once in a while, I do look at the comments on YouTube, but I also like the ones, especially from from iTunes. So here's one from P Taylor 78. Really appreciate the betting content here based on math rather than vibes and feelings. Keep the content coming. A couple questions for you guys from relatively novice bettor. There has been some week one line movement since the NFL initial schedule. Baltimore from 4.5 to 5.5. Detroit plus 4.5 down to +4. Hashtag restore the roar. I love the fact now, George, by the way, whenever I go on a show, somebody has to carve out like 5 minutes to talk about Detroit because of what we've done, the Restore the Roar media company that we are. From what I have researched, it seems like activity from sharks and smart money is the only thing that moves lines in June and July. So my questions are there any week one bets that you guys are taking now with anticipation that lines will move away from you? I think what they mean is towards us, as the public bets are more in August, September. If you are able to find a soft book, Caesars hasn't moved a line since they opened, from what I can tell. Is there extra value in taking lines that have moved other places because smart money is driving that movement? I really like this question because it shows a lot of really, I would say, sort of like, yeah, like this person claimed, I'm a novice bettor. I want to know something about this stuff. And I think it reveals a lot of myths that people must be saying, but it also asks some really good questions. And so
can I just pause you for a second?
Sure.
We have to call out someone when they lie. Okay. And this person is a huge liar, an immense liar. How many bettors have we talked to, Eric? I mean, I've talked to like 200 of these wonderful people, many of whom have claimed to be not novice, not, adolescent, but advanced bettors. And none of them can even tell me what the price means.
Right.
Our guy here,
this person knows a lot more than a novice.
The humility pouring out of this question, I really appreciate.
This
is a good question.
What I like most about this, though, is I agree with you that this person knows more than a complete novice. Folks that you have, listened to, and as we try to build the best and most delightful products at PFF, I think what they're hitting on is, even if you know a little bit about betting, right? And you and I have been in this camp. I mean, we've learned so much since you and I first started doing the show. And even then, like, we knew a lot when we started the show, and at times it wasn't enough to win. So it does take more than just a little bit of knowledge about betting to win at betting. But you have to start somewhere. So I kind of want to talk about a few things, a few like sort of questions that come from this. The first one is, from what this person has researched, it seems like the smart money is the only thing that moves markets. That is absolutely correct. And for the most part, like, there are some instances. So, the Super Bowl is one of them. I'm trying to think of the Super Bowl in football is the one that's big, but like, public money usually does not have a say in the direction the betting markets go, period. It's almost entirely sharp money, and it's almost entirely sharp books, right? So there are only a few real market makers in the NFL and college football, and everybody else just copies the lines off of everybody else. So that's something to understand. So if you go into your PPH, which is a pay per head, which is basically like a website that a street bookie would use, not to like, but like, sort of your local bookie has a website that you can bet into, so you don't no longer have to call them and give them money, and so on and so forth. That book is copying their lines from some line service. It's copying their lines from a market maker. And what do we mean by market maker? We mean a book that basically originates their own lines based upon models, based upon historical betting data, so on and so forth. And before any of us even see some of these numbers, offers bets to sharp bettors off screen. So that's what you're up against is, these sharp books are taking bets from, you can name anybody that we know as smart, really sharp bettors, but they're pounding that number into place early in the week through, low limits. And then by the time you get to Sunday, that number has been pounded into place where then they're offering their biggest limits, because essentially what they're doing is getting you to pay the vig into a 50-50 market.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I think is good to call out is so when you think about why only sharps move the market, right? There is it takes a lot of kind of casual money to really make things lopsided. And the people that are casual bettors who are putting in lots of money, you're not going, oh, I need to change that up. I need to make sure that this whale doesn't put in another, 500K bet on this side. Like, you're not getting any information from that person that you haven't already gleaned from people that actually know what's going on. And the sharp bettors are also putting in a lot more money than the average bettor, right? So they're actually putting in valuable insight with their wager. Whereas, what are you going to do with 100 people who know nothing, or 1,000 people, or 200,000 people that know nothing, who are each putting in $10? Yes, that's worth a lot of money in total, but it's not giving you that amount's worth of information, I think is kind of the point that you're making, right? The information that you're getting from one person that knows what they're doing, who's betting $200,000, versus a ton of people who just have no idea, who are probably just following something that they've seen anyways. You're not going to react to that.
Yeah. And the thing is like most of these, market making books, I mean, they're deploying data science. I think there was a really good data camp podcast with Marco Bloom from Pinnacle, which is one of those market making books. Circa and BetChris are two others, where he describes sharp bettors as consultants, right? So early on in a week, like let's say the limits are like $2,000 for a side and $1,000 for a total, and you take a sharp bet from a person who has, they've profiled and they're profiling you. We'll talk about that in a little bit. They're profiling you and they're like, this is a sharp better on totals in the NFL, and this person just bet us over 44. We're going to move that to 45 now. That better is going to win 55% or 50, 54, 55% of the time. And they're going to win against you long-term. But that information is going to pound that number into place where you take a lot more bets. And that basically that money that you pay out to the winner is kind of a consulting fee in some ways. And that's in many ways. And I think a lot of like market-based people will tell you that's probably better than doing data science. It's a better investment to do data science plus this information than just data science alone, which I think makes sense. But they're profiling, and they know who the sharp bettors are. And it doesn't necessarily have to be whether or not you win. And this is where, some of the recreational books, so the Barstool, FanDuel, DraftKings, like they're calculating whether you beat the closing line. They're calculating, in what markets, and Paperheads will do this too. Like they have information on you. Like I remember within the first month of betting WNBA, I got my limit on second half team totals limited to $1. Like, and that was just because I would bet it and it would move a point and it would win. And it took 10 bets for them to limit me. Whereas, other sports, like there are other books that don't limit me on NFL because I lost early on. Right. And it takes forever. And I was talking to Jay Crowder from PointsBet, who was talking, he's their head of trading. He was talking about, sort of other books. And he's like, sometimes it's actually valuable for you to lose early on in your tenure at a at a book or to get accounts from people who have lost early on, because you don't have any of those flags, and it takes a long time for you to be unprofiled from a loser to a winner, and you can collect on those before the books, catch up. There is a number of different ways, and I won't pretend to be limited on every single sport or things like that. But, there are ways, like, for example, player props, we'll talk about that in a second, where you might only want it, like the sharp sides are almost always unders. So if you come in and you just bang unders on player props, and you win a couple times, they might limit you right away. Versus if you come in and only bet overs, they might be sharp overs, but they're less. But overs are bet a lot by squares too, so it might not necessarily be flagged, and you might be able to have some fun there for a lot longer.
Yeah, the sharp thing and betting profiles is really interesting. I spent some time in the trading room at a sports book that does make their own lines. And one of the really interesting things is the way that they talk about the sharp bettors. And it's kind of the opposite of what you're talking about at kind of the retail books, right? Where it's like, oh, they're looking to identify you so they can keep you from betting. Here it was, we're watching bets come in. We know when bets are coming in from someone that we respect. And when that happens, we're excited to talk about, oh, so-and-so has just come in and bet, these three things. What do we think? And, they're sitting there looking at kind of these panel of numbers and going, well, let's move it, let's move it a half point, and they'll move it a half point. But there are also times when the sharp bettor came in and they're like, well, we know this guy bets these things really well, but he also just has this weakness where and maybe they didn't say weakness, but like also just likes to bet, a bunch of long shots that he thinks have, these chances. Like, we're not actually going to move those, these are like 50-1. We're not moving them on this. They have information. And so they know, where the people are, certain people are sharp, where they are not, to your point earlier. And it's really interesting. I think it's cool. It's fun to understand, I think, as well, for people who, and many of whom are listening to this podcast, like, don't, you're not quitting your job to go be a pro sports bettor, but that doesn't mean that it's not interesting to learn about the people that are doing this for a profession, much like, in my opinion, people that are playing professional poker, where it is not, sharp bettors are not waking up on Sunday hungover and going, you know what, I think I'll put some same game parlays down. Now, there's nothing wrong with playing a same game parlay on a Sunday morning, but don't get it twisted that no one's going to go, oh, sharp bettor over here coming in, Jimmy coming in at 12:35 with another sharp same game parlay. Let's limit you. There's this big difference between what those profiles look like. And so it's something that sports books can tell pretty quickly. Another thing that I think has been really interesting in listening to bettors and asking them about their habits is no one, even people, again, aforementioned experts, no one bets early in the week. I mean, no one. So that is a really easy way to be like, oh, you're a different breed, built different. Another question that you had here that I thought was really interesting, and I'm curious to get your take on this, because we've talked about this a little bit, but I want to see if that has changed at all, is why prop markets are becoming so popular, and just to give a sense of how popular they are becoming. This was printed. FanDuel said they 2x their NBA prop markets over the last year.
Yeah, I have this urge, and I'm not going to be able to get there because of so many meetings, but like FanDuel is offering WNBA player props. Like, this is where we are in this world right now. Mm-hmm. And that's awesome. Like, it's just great. Like, and this, I think, answers our friend P. Taylor's 78 questions as well. So like when he or she asks, like, if you can find the soft book, sharp book sort of dynamic, what do you do? Right. Mm-hmm. And derivatives and props are called derivatives because they're derived from the base market, right? So usually like first quarters, second quarters, first half, team totals, all of that, those are derived from the market, that what are called the price discovery markets, where price discovery is basically the act of, taking money and finding out what the true price is by trusting the wisdom of the crowds. And that's, I think, the answer to this question, which is, okay, every single book is going to copy either Circa or Pinnacle or BetCris quickly and get that number into place really fast. Unless you're a huge degenerate that has a Don Best screen, or our friends at Underdog, or our friends at Unabated, or something like that, where you can see it and you bet immediately. You're going to struggle, I think, just being able to pick off movements in big markets, but you can pick off derivative markets. So what I mean is, let's say that there's like a big, torrential downpour in Miami for a game, and that moves the total from 47.5 down to 44.5. You're probably not going to be fast enough to get that. And if you do, it's probably not going to be a big enough move by the time you bet it for it to matter. Like, it has to move like multiple, depending upon whether you in a spread, you move through 3 or 7 or 6 or whatever, or for totals, you move through, there's a couple like key totals. But even then, you're not getting that much of an edge. But you can like go and say, well, look, I saw the Dolphins total move from 47.5 to 44.5, but Tua's passing yardage prop is staying still here, right? That's where you can kind of clean up on market movements in sharp markets and clean up in dull markets that are more correlated with that result, right? You can use the information from the sharp offerings to bet into the weaker offerings. And that's really, I think, why prop markets are becoming popular, because you can win. Like, the prop markets, and we won in the NFL last year. We actually did pretty good in both NFL and college football, especially against openers. But like, against close, we were basically a little bit better than break even. Like, it's really, you win. It's hard to win against close. And the majority of people that are betting on Sunday morning. And so for the majority of them to win, they have to bet into markets that are softer, and prop markets are softer, and they're derivatives of the bigger market. And so folks that either, bet for a living, or folks that bet recreationally, or folks that have, betting content shows, like, that's the place where they can offer possibly winning advice.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I will agree and disagree with your point here. The reason I will is I think there's some nuance to this, which is for bettors, especially recreational bettors, it's not as much about the consistent cash flow as it is the opportunity for excitement and the price at which it costs you to have that excitement. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I have $100 and I bet $100 on the Bengals plus 4.5 in the Super Bowl. Let's make it the Rams. Okay. So I lose that bet. That stinks. Okay. And there may be a case where you bet a spread and you don't even have a chance. Right. And I think if you were watching that Rams Bengals game, you were probably kind of down and out for most of it, because the Bengals were winning that game, right? They came from behind. So you're kind of just like, shit, this sucks. But if I am able to take a bunch of props, and again, there's only so many, bets you can make for a single game. And we know about the way people consume games, that they go into it with like, hey, I'm going to watch this game. I want to bet this game. And so losing a single bet for $100, where you could have been out of it from the time the game starts, to going, well, I've got like 3 or 4 bets here and I risked $100. But if I win, I might win $500. And Eric, 2 of my props have already hit, and it's the second quarter.
Yeah.
And you're telling your wife, honey, go look up some wine tasting options for next weekend, because I might be taking us somewhere. I don't know if anyone's actually doing that, but you might end up losing that last prop bet. It was worth it. Your engagement increased. And so the point that you're making around you can win more, I don't know that it's necessarily that they're becoming more popular because people are actually picking up on what you're saying of like, you know, I can actually win more on these single prop bets, but more so I can win more based on the outcome that I'm looking for, right? Every time I hit one of those props, I feel a little bit better about myself, right? And more engagement.
Yeah, they're better both from an entertainment standpoint and a winning bet standpoint, right? So you're right. Like if I bet a football game and I bet the dog +7 and they're down 28-0 in the first quarter, I'm screwed, right? Like and basically my way of watching that game is over. We've always talked about, I think this came out of the movie Action. You probably have better data than I do, but like the average bettor and the average DFS player watches 3 more games per season in the NFL than just like the average fan. It's like 15 per year for the average fan. It's like 45 per year for the average like DFS player and bettor. And it's because you get to stay around longer, right? Like you remember Burrow week 2 against Cleveland in 2020, and they're behind like 15 or so. Burrow comes backdoors that thing at +6, and we're all they were out of that game, but we're all watching with bated breath. Today, I was watching my Indiana Fever against the Connecticut Sun, and I bet them +9.5, +10, +8.5. And by golly, they were down 20 points in the fourth quarter. Not only did the Indiana Fever come back and hit the over, they covered on 2 free throws with 8 seconds left against the backups of the Connecticut Sun. And I'm watching that game at the end, and it does not matter because the Sun were winning, but they came back and covered that thing. And that just is compelling. But what's really cool is, and again, this is like a poker analogy, but you have, and it's also an investment analogy, you have so many more outs, right? So, I can bet a T. Higgins over receiving yards, and he can get there in a number of different game states. So he can get there if the Bengals get blown out and he catches balls in garbage time. He can get over the way he did, which is a close game. He makes a couple really big plays because he's one of the key players. You're rarely going to go over in a game if you distribute your money around a bunch of props. So that makes it more entertaining, but also you could win more. And then additionally, the markets are not sharp. So we were talking to some folks that do the other day that set prices for these books, and they don't have the price discovery situation. Like there's not millions of dollars in action coming in on these. So they have to set the prices algorithmically, and they're going to be wrong. And there are going to be situations like I remember, Cam Akers in the Super Bowl. You could have got him under, I can't remember the exact number. Let's just throw it out, 65.5. And there were some books that were hanging 61.5. You get a 4-point middle there. And like, that's just, if you're just picking those off and the numbers are right, and you're not laying 150 on one side and 140 on another, you're just profitable just by sheer, arbing. And that's kind of where I think it adds to the whole you can win thing. Now, that does not work for content creators. If we came out and said, let's say our lock of the week was, okay, George, on Caesars, Justin Jefferson over 6.5 is -130. And then on FanDuel, under 8.5 is +110. Our lock of the week is that middle, and like, that's bullshit. Like, we're not going to do that, but ultimately that's what people should be doing. And I think that's, and you don't get that opportunity in sides and totals for NFL or college football. You simply do not.
Yeah. It's an interesting question because what I was going to ask originally, and now I'm not even sure if it's that interesting, but like I was thinking about like, what if our lock of the week, we just made as confusing as possible every single week? It's like, So here's what it is. You've got to do this, then you've got to run here, and then you've got to time this up. And like, it's the summer solstice. So make sure that you bet against this and this and this. That would be kind of funny. But I don't know, like, do you think that like retail and like, kind of average consumer bettors would want to bet those kinds of things if it were easier to bet? Like, let's say you posted something, and I'm thinking about this for like the PFF app, right? Okay, which is coming soon, by the way. Get on our beta group if you haven't already. You'll be able to check it out early. So let's say that you sent something out and you said, arb opportunity. Here's what you bet, right? And it's like, it's exactly what you said. Jamar Chase over here and Jamar Chase over here. Like, do you think people are going, oh yeah, let me grab that? Because my take would be, I don't know that consumers who have all these busy lives, right? And maybe I'm wrong. And that's why I'm asking you, like, will they come in and do that? Or is it going to be, is it too hard to break that, that kind of the way that they do things and the way that they think about engagement?
I think it depends, because I do think the popularity of parlays gives a little bit of insight into what people are trying to, like what recreational bettors are trying to do, which is bet a little bit to make a lot, right? Mm-hmm. So if I were to bet Cam Akers under 65.5 yards and then Cam Akers over 61.5 yards, I got whatever percentage those yards are, and the payout, which is basically 2x my bet divided by the VIG, basically, right? And then, and so that's betting a little to make a lot, right? Like you basically lose the VIG if you don't get the middle, right? One side of the VIG. But I also don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze. So like, we'll come back to baseball. So baseball, there was a lot of opportunity years ago, where people would just line shop and they bet, they scalp. It's called a scalp. If you scalp a few cents off of, so, one book is laying minus 127. The other book is laying minus 116. So you can kind of like, you can calculate the number you have to bet in order to sort of like edge out, like, 3%. Right. But 3% is nothing to a recreational bettor who's betting $25, right? Like that's on the order of dollars in terms of like expected value. But if you're a pro and you're betting like 5K a side, then you can make real money doing that. But that's not who like this podcast is catered towards. Like, I know that there are pro bettors that listen to our show, but they're not necessarily listening for the picks. They're listening for the thought processes and stuff to put in their own models and stuff like that. So that's where, if you can get a middle and say like, look, there's a middle available, let's toss aside the fact that not everybody has access to them. So if there's an offshore book like Bet Online that is offering a prop, and then there's a legal book like FanDuel that's offering a different one, everybody has access to Bet Online. Not everybody has access to FanDuel. So I would shy away from that kind of stuff just because like a listener in Ohio can't actually execute that bet. But there's also the fact that the juice might not be worth the squeeze for most players. And the VIG is such that it's better than a parlay, in my opinion, in a lot of cases, right? If you bet a middle like that, it's better than a parlay, especially if you're getting, like at FanDuel, you're getting 15-cent lines, 10-cent lines on props. If you're getting like 25-cent lines, like some of these paperheads, it's probably a shitty bet relative to a parlay. But that is like the appetite of a recreational bettor is I want to get the plus 260 parlay for 2 minus 110 bets.
It's interesting. I think we're going to learn a lot more, obviously every single week, every single year about this, but it's fascinating. And just thinking back to like, mainstream football, that's why the stat you mentioned is so telling, is because you look at who's going to be vying to show all of these games, right? It's going to be between Apple, Disney, and Amazon. That's who's, bidding on the Sunday ticket, opportunity. And if you look at Apple has purchased a lot of live sports content. They have baseball. They just bought MLS. And if I had to put my money on something, and I actually have, given where I've invested, I would bet that they are going to win the Sunday ticket opportunity. The reason I believe that is that I think they have more money to spend. They're going to make a better offer, honestly, than Amazon. I think the only reason Amazon might get it would be the tie they have to the league already, but I think the league loves money. So I kind of think it'd be Amazon, but Apple. But you've got to kind of think like, I mean, they must be looking at these numbers. Like, there's a big difference between 100 million people who are watching 15 games. Now 100 million people are watching 45 games and are fucking engaged, right?
Mm-hmm.
And are like excited about it. That's just better for the broadcasters. So I don't think it's surprising. I have two questions for you because these were all really good questions. My first question is around parlays, which is you, Eric Eager. What's the worst bet? Not like, in hindsight, oh, I got my like math wrong or whatever. Like, what's the worst bet you've ever placed where you're like, I know this is just not a good bet. Maybe it's a bunch of overs or some parlay or something like that. What is the worst bet you've ever placed?
Oh,
and don't tell me you've never placed one, because I know emotions have gotten the best of you.
The worst bet I ever placed was Chiefs -3 in the Bucs Super Bowl because our model liked the Bucs and I let my fandom get in the way.
That's a good one.
Yeah. We all succumb to it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Here's one. And also I'll give, okay. So I don't know. People don't know how paper heads work, but basically like you bet on credit. And then when the balance gets to 1,000 or minus 1,000, you either have to pay up or you become the mayor of Antigua for the week.
Mm-hmm.
I did that this week. I like I said on Sunday, I did not lose a CFL bet. I think I even nailed my favorite baseball team, George, and I'm channeling our friendship here, is the San Francisco Giants, who are on kind of a swoon.
Yeah.
But I bet in them a few times. I got to a point where my paper head was, plus 800 for the week or whatever. I'm like, okay, all right. There's nothing left on.
Yeah.
My hometown Minnesota Timberwolves were playing a summer league game, and my brothers in Christ, they hung this is how degenerate it was, George. I wanted to bet the first half total. I wanted that fucker done. Like, I didn't even want to sit through a whole game. I wanted to know whether or not I was getting a cash out that week or not.
Okay.
So I put the 200, and actually with the VIG, it was like 220 that I needed to get the 200 to get to my cash out for the week. Put it on over 87. And I got to tell you, my brothers in Christ could not. And I don't know. People dog on the WNBA. I'm sorry. I watched a summer league game myself as a human. Those guys can't dribble. They can't finish. None of those people can shoot. That game got to 60 first half. And I just remember texting, everybody knows that my betting partner is Ben Brown. And I text Ben, I'm like, the Supreme Court should outlaw this kind of game. Like, that's how bad it was. And I felt even bigger of a idiot for watching it, but like that was all that was left. And I don't like baseball. I'm not like, and actually I bet the over in the Yankees Red Sox games to get me to plus 800. Like, I was kind of like, okay, I probably shouldn't have this much in my account anyway. So let's just steady the universe here. And of course, yesterday I went to the Lynx game, and as I tweeted out, I put a sizable amount on the Lynx over, and that game got to like 110 each. And so if I just was patient, I would have been fine. But of course, I wanted that money like now. And so I bet a summer league game. That was the worst bet I've ever made. And it was Sunday, so we can all grow.
Summer League, I will say this. If you haven't been to Summer League is a fun thing to go to.
Yeah.
Because you can just you're in Vegas first off, and you can just talk to people, and that's fun, but you also don't have to watch the games, which can sometimes be an atrocity. Okay. I have another question for you. If you had to do a podcast on a topic other than the one that we are currently doing it on, what would it be?
Other than football, let's just say. Broadly.
Yeah, and you can't pick WNBA betting. That's not a fair answer, right?
Mm-hmm. I would love to do a podcast on the mindset, the growth mindset. You and I are both fairly.
We could do that. We could do that podcast. That like both of us would be very enthralled. I don't think our listeners would be super stoked to hear.
No,
that
of course, and that
we
all make decisions that
hey, guys, welcome in to another episode.
Maybe our friend Peter Overzet can make like a TikTok making fun of that kind of podcast. But like, to me, like, in both of us manage people, both of us have taught before, both of us have run the gamut of human experience. Let's just say that. I think a lot of people believe we're we're a cloister and everything. Like, no, like you and I have like run the gamut of human experience, and we've faced and enjoyed a great deal of human diversity, let's just say. And I would imagine that we would have a fairly fun conversation about how to navigate the world in a constructive way.
I think the growth mindset would be interesting. It would be really cool to dive into ways that manifests itself in different industries, and stories of it prevailing, and where it has been what's the right areas where it is it's something that people don't believe in, and how that has kind of deteriorated their situation or not. I think if I had to pick a topic outside of the one that we were doing, I am enamored with people that get paid to eat food. And I assume I haven't looked. There's all these TV shows about it. I'm assuming there are plenty of podcasts about it, but if you haven't noticed, in my recommendations, I recommend food all the time. So maybe there's like an eat good food and talk about the growth mindset podcast.
One last thing that's interesting. Have you at all gotten into the genre of podcasts where it's like old time actors and actresses that talk about the show they did?
No.
So I listen to this podcast called Inside of You, which is pretty funny. It's Michael Rosenbaum, who played Lex Luthor on Smallville, and like he and the guy that played Clark Kent, Tom Welling, are doing a podcast about the show. But like, I just found out that the people that played Sean and Corey on Boy Meets World, they've had like a long-standing podcast where they go through every single episode of the show that happened in like the 90s. The women that played, that played on the OC, they have a podcast. I mean, I loved all of those shows, and those podcasts don't appeal to me at all.
Here's what I'll say. You are one of my dearest friends. Probably like one of the only people on the planet that I actually talk to about anything other than work. If I ever tell you, Eric, I'm calling it early tonight, I'm going to go listen to an actor talk about a show that they used to be in, the Ohio River is right over there.
You got to take me out back and shoot me between the eyes.
Take me down.
It's over.
I'm done. Okay. I don't
get it. And they must be popular. And like, they must be popular.
Here's what I'll say. I think we've noticed this. Both of us, as you mentioned, have been in professions where you either kind of go all in or you don't do it. Teaching is that way. Like what we do right now, you and I work in insane hours, and we love it. Like there's nothing I'd rather do than work. I think the fact of the matter is we do probably not understand well enough the human condition that most people have in their jobs, where they are not working on something they're as passionate about. And so you're looking for those, you just have way more free time. Like that's the only thing I can come up with, to be perfectly honest. Like that's it, right? Like it's just like, I hate my life, I'm gonna go listen to this.
I would rather watch Boy Meets World again than listen
point.
To it. Like, and I love Boy.
Yes.
Like I mean, who didn't cry when Mr. Feeney, like, at the end of that show, But I'm just kind of like, I was taken aback by it. I mean, very interesting.
Yeah. Anyways, so we won't be doing that podcast. Let's be clear. That will not be a podcast that we were doing. Although speaking of things that happened or that were filmed a long time ago that I would like to watch again, that you reminded me of, is Van Wilder.
Very good.
Very good show.
Yeah, Tara Reid, Cal Penn, whose book was terrific. I recommended that before. Cisco,
Yes, that's how we came
in that movie.
That's how we came up with it.
Yeah, I mean, just an absolute romp. Yeah, this is a great movie.
Need to watch it in my endless free time. Maybe I will.
Yep.
That was our podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. We will be back on Sunday. British Open Championship Sunday. I don't have any bets for you because I'd be lying to you if I even realized that it was happening tomorrow until like literally 5 seconds ago when I thought about what Sunday would be. So I'll just tell you this: Tiger's playing. I'm going to bet on Tiger. I hope you guys all do too, and probably bet someone else that has a real chance of winning. We love you all. Thanks for hanging out. Peace.